Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2024 Northeast Philadelphia History Fair. I'm Jack McCarthy. I'm the president of the Friends of Northeast Philadelphia History, and we're the organization that sponsors this event. And as you see out in the main hallway are all these local historical societies, historic sites, authors that have presentations and displays. And then we have two formal presentations. You're at the first one, and then we have one at 1 o'clock. I'm going to give a little plug for that second one, and then I'll introduce our speaker right now. But at 1 o'clock, there's a presentation called Hark Back with Love. And this is a book that we discovered that was out of print that we were able to have reprinted, and it's for sale, main table right up by the stage. Woman that was born in the 1880s. She was the youngest of 5 children. And they were living in downtown Philadelphia. The parents died, and 5 kids went to live with these 4 unmarried aunts, Quaker aunts, in far northeast Philadelphia in Byberry. The property that is now basically Archbishop Bryant High School, and next to it, St. Martha's Catholic Church. If you know that area on Academy Road, there was an estate there called Chestnut Glen. All these kids grew up there with their aunts. And then the woman, the youngest of them, Frances Richardson, who died in 1973. In 1970, she wrote a memoir of growing up there. And it's very detailed and very beautifully written, incredible, long before this area was developed, when it was all farms and villages and horses and buggies. So it's an amazing historical account of that time. The book was out of print. We rediscovered it. We were able to get it reprinted. And so now it's for sale at our main table. And then at 1 o'clock, there will be a presentation on that. So come back for that. And then for now, we are really happy to have Debbie Szymanski here to speak on Northeast Village, which I won't tell you much about. It's an amazing story of this massive housing development post-World War II. Debbie was born there. And
yeah, I was born there.
She was there, but moved away when she was very young. But she did her doctoral dissertation on this. She has a PhD, and her subject was Northeast Village. So you're going to hear from the expert on Northeast Village. So without further ado, Dr. Debbie Szymanski.
Yep, I have the clicker. Thank you. Thank you all for that welcome. Expert, I'm not so sure. I think that all of you who grew up in the village are probably a lot more of an expert than I am. But I'm very happy to share with you what I learned by doing the research that I did and the interviews that I did with some of your community mates that were happy to share their experiences with me. So this first picture here is a picture of the village. Some of the pictures that I have came from the Temple University archives. They don't have a lot, believe it or not. So a lot of the history of the village is really living with you guys, and we don't have a lot of it written down, things like that. So I think that was one of the reasons why I felt like this was so important, that we sort of have some kind of living document of what is happening. So let me get started. So I wanted to start with this proverb. It takes a village to raise a child. So this proverb comes from an African proverb that conveys the message that it takes many people to provide a safe and healthy environment for children, where they are given the security they need to develop and realize their dreams. So many people, right? The village was a community where everybody came together. Everybody looked out for each other's children. I felt like this really fit the village definition. So what are the ingredients of a healthy environment? Children's voices are taken seriously, and where multiple people including parents, siblings, extended family members, neighbors, and teachers all care for their child. Families all support each other. It can be either close family where you live with your parents and they're always looking out for you, or it can be indirectly, like neighbors who watch your kids when you go to work or when they're out playing and they're out of your line of sight. So these are all factors that are important in understanding why it takes a village to raise a child. These factors today are not always available, right? We have families who today don't live near each other. I have a son who lives in Doylestown, which lucky for me is pretty close, but it's not like I lived 5 blocks from my mom, right? So it's very different today. The breaking down of families, both parents working, increased mobility, and just feeling less connected to your family than we did years ago. So my research interests really focused on the resiliency of the people who grew up in the village. As I got to know the people who lived in the village, I realized that they all had a certain resiliency about them. They all started out the same way. You all came together in the same community, but yet you all had this resiliency. And my question was always, where did that come from? How did that grow, right? Because we often think about people who face adversity as really not having really good chances of having a successful life. But the village people, that didn't happen with you guys. So we define resiliency as the ability to bounce back from adversity and continue to move forward to our goals. So one of the things we know from research is that there are certain factors that mitigate the risk factors. The risk factors can be a lot of things. It can be poverty, it can be trauma, it can be separation from family. There's many risk factors that kids can experience. And so we look at these protective factors and we think, well, what is it about their life that makes them different than other kids? So we have found that while there are some personality characteristics that go along with that, there's also other influences from the world around them. So as far as kids are concerned, the 3 main areas that we believe are really important are the community they live in, the family they come from, and their school experiences. So especially school, right? Because we spend a lot of our time in school. So this is the first picture I have of the village. And if you go to the table in the back, you'll see much larger maps with more detail about the houses and the roads. But it was, a fairly big community. So a little bit of the history of the village. And like I said, there's not a lot of written down history. So a lot of it is the memories and things that people have, shared with me through my research. So the village was opened in 1946. At that time, there was both a housing shortage and a shortage of jobs for the returning veterans. The government, realizing this shortage, created various housing communities throughout the city to give vets a chance to gain stability. Thus, the Northeast Village was formed, along with several other developments around the city. I was surprised to find out that there were other veterans housing developments. There was one in South Philly. There was a couple in the lower Northeast. Today we have Hill Creek, which is in Lawndale, and Abbotsford Homes, which is in Germantown. They both at one time were veterans housing. But like the other ones, they weren't closed up. They turned them into low-income housing. So the government had given the contract to manage the Northeast Village to the Philadelphia Housing Authority. The community remained open for 15 years, much longer than any of the other communities. closing in 1962. So here's a picture of one of the village homes. Now there's different, from what I can gather, different styles. So some of them are black, some of them are white, but they're all basically the same on the inside, right? There were 2-bedroom units, 1-bedroom units. There were 3 bedrooms, but they were very scarce from what I understand. So for larger families, you were really pretty, compact. They weren't very well insulated. There was no air conditioning. They were cold in the winter, hot in the summer. They were fueled with a kerosene heater, right? That was in the main, I guess, living room area. And so you would have to go out back. I think I have these are the other pictures here. So you can see it's a little more developed. Like one picture you can see there's paved streets, sidewalk, and the other one there's not. So there's like different sections of the village being built, so some of them were more developed than others. So here you can see the house where the back porch, you can see the tank there, that was the kerosene tank. So you would have to go outside, get the kerosene in the dead of the winter, take it inside, fill the oil tank, or fill the kerosene tank. And from what I'm told, it really it didn't heat the whole unit, even though they were small. So, you were cold. And there was one of the people that I interviewed had told me this story where in a particularly cold winter, he and his brother had bunk beds, and they took the mattress off the top bunk and they pretty much sandwiched themselves in between the two of them with their blankets to try and stay warm. The windows were drafty, there weren't screens. So you can imagine the houses are pretty, just someplace to live, But everybody made them home. So here's what a kitchen would have looked like inside one of the units. I don't have a lot of pictures of what it looked like inside. So this is one of the rare ones that I have. But you can tell, like we're not talking spacious areas here. So this is the food mart that was in the village. So these things grew, right? As the village grew and as more and more people moved in, there were more things that were needed. So, they had a village mart, they had their own doctor's office, they had a barber shop, they had, I believe, something else. What was it? The drugstore, right? Did you have a fire station? Yeah. So they really were like a whole community, right? And because of where they were situated at, between Roosevelt Boulevard, Comley Road, the Northeast Airport, and Academy, Decatur, they were very insulated because that part in the Northeast at that time was mostly farms. And you'll see when the gentleman that was talking about the presentation at 1 o'clock, that farm was right down the street from the village. So that's the kind of rural area that was at that time. So for them to be able to, for the villagers to be able to sort of, exist and have everything they need, they started building these businesses to take care of themselves. Very insulated community. So here's the village school, right? Everybody remembers the school. So the schooling is really important for kids, right? We spend 6-7 hours of our day in school, so we hang out with our friends, we play, we know our teachers know us. The village school was really unique in the sense that the only kids that went there were from the village. So everybody you knew in school were the same people you knew in your neighborhood. One of the things that many of the people I interviewed would talk about was how they never felt poor, or they never felt like they had less. They always felt like they were just like everybody else, because this is their insulated community. They really didn't know a lot of what was outside of that, right? So while school for them, when they were young, could be seen as one of these protective factors, one of these ways that they were, you know, nurtured and cared for, when they got older and had to then go to school outside of the village, it was somewhat of a culture shock, right? Because now it was, well, you're from the village. There was definitely a, you know, yeah, there was definitely a stigma about that. But for the time that they spent in their elementary school, they were happy. Many of the villagers that I interviewed talked about how their teachers were encouraging. I know one of our guests today, I had actually put in my talk about how her teacher would encourage her to be a writer because she liked to write. And, you know, although that didn't come to pass for her, these are the kind of interests that the teachers took in their students. There's one of the graduation pins. You guys will recognize that. And one of the people who came today actually brought one of their pins, so you'll see it out on the table. So community and sports, right? The other protective factor we talked about was community. The community always came together for different things, whether it was sports or whether there were issues going on in the community that they needed to discuss. They always came together to do that. So baseball was really popular. They also had a football team. They had Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, a lot of the things that every other, you know, neighborhood would have. But it was the parents of the kids that did these things. So there weren't people from outside coming in, but they were doing this on their own because they knew that these things were important for their kids. And then this is a picture of the community center. A lot of the things that the villagers took part in happened here. If there were important meetings, things like that, they would be held in here. This particular picture is a teacher would come and provide dance lessons. So you can see the girls there. Maybe it was a recital or, you know, something like that. They played basketball. In the summer, they had a summer camp. They would all come and they had hot dogs and sodas and, you know, things like that. So it was just to keep the kids occupied during the summer, you know, give them something to do. But again, this is how the community all came together. Everybody knew each other. Everybody hung out together. You know, it was just part of what you did. So now, like I said, when we were talking about school, right, experiencing the outside world, pride meets prejudice. For whatever reason, people outside of the village had a negative belief about the people who lived there. I can't tell you why. I don't know. There's no real information about that. I think that there probably could be some guesses as to why. I think people knew that it was a community that had started a while ago and that the people who initially moved in there were financially struggling, you know, and maybe that's part of it, you know, especially the kids that went off to high school, that went to Lincoln. I was told about a few instances where they were bullied. You know, boys would get into fights because they would, you know, be bullied into it. Girls seemed to have a little bit easier time because they could kind of stick together in a group. So they kind of had that, you know, safety in numbers kind of thing, you know. But the negative attitudes were definitely there. And I think even sometimes today, I think some people are hesitant, you know, to say where they came from. And I know myself, even though I really didn't live there that long, I would always say, somebody would say, where were you born? I'd say someplace you never heard of. Because nobody ever did, you know. And the funny thing about that, I mean, talking about how, like, you know, your experience kind of reaches out, you know, to other people. There was a friend of ours who we've known for quite a while. And one day we were sitting around talking about like where we were born and where we grew up. And that's what I said to him. And he looked at me and he said, "Were you born in the village?" I was like, "Yeah." It turned out he knew my family. It was really weird. And we had been friends for a few years and we never knew that because we didn't talk about it, you know, so. But so, you know, the kids had to find a way to get through this. You know, they had to be able to meet up against these attitudes and still maintain their healthy attitudes about themselves. Some people came out of it unscathed. Some people still today feel sort of uncomfortable about that, you know. So just to kind of wrap it up, right? I pulled some memorable quotes that other people I interviewed had said to me when we were doing our work together. So the first one was a gentleman. He was one of the first families that moved in when the village first opened. He came from South Philly. So he was used to row houses and cement walks and streets. He moved into the village and he was like, I felt like we moved into unknown territory. I went from row houses in South Philly to nothing. Farms, woods, grass. What are we doing here? He's like, I don't know what we're doing here. Why are we moving here? Another one, we were out for, they would talk about how they would go out from breakfast to dinner. You know, you didn't really have a lot of what you thought supervision, but like he said, they felt so independent, but what they didn't realize is that all the other neighbors were watching over them. We learned respect, helpfulness, everybody pulling together, acceptance, and how to make the best out of everything. Being from the Northeast Village was his identity. It was his tribe, his village. That was the way he really felt about that. And this last one I thought really summed it up. And this is the same guy who I was telling you knew my family. Even, he's passed away now, but even at his funeral, the village meant so much to him that his son talked a long time about how proud his dad was to come from the village. He was buried with the village sweatshirt that we had given him. So it really meant a lot to him. And you can see with his quote, it is not only what you made of it living in the village, but it's what made you. It shaped your outlook, understanding that no matter how bad it really was never that bad. And that's it. Thank you.
Check. So, yeah, we're going to take questions. Stay right here.
Oh, okay.
What we're going to do, this is being recorded, by the way, so that your questions get recorded. I'm going to hand you the microphone, and then Debbie will answer your questions. So this gentleman here, I have to come over and.
You mentioned that the village had everything. It even had its own bus route, number 87.
Yep.
Every, but it's only a 5, but
You're right. It did have its own bus route. And one of the maps that we have out back in the table actually has a mark on it where the bus stops were.
Anybody else?
Hi, Debbie. Thank you for this great presentation.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate it. Does anybody remember the Tin Castle?
Yes.
Does
Yes.
anybody have a picture of the Tin Castle?
I have not been able to find a picture of it. No.
Okay, thank you.
I've had the descriptions where they talk about, you know, it being like a Quonset hut sort of thing. Yeah. Oh, okay. So you know what it looked like. Yeah. Yeah, I know. And that's the sad part, right? Is that we really don't have these physical sort of remembrances. Yeah. We need an artist that can draw them as you describe it. Yeah.
I never heard of Northeast Village? What is there now? Is it still there?
No, part of it turned into the industrial park. As you go up Roosevelt Boulevard, you know where like Pepsi is and those places. So that's part of it. Where the airport is, the airport was there originally, but some of the village was taken, you know, for the airport. And the rest of the empty ground along Comley Road, if you go down and you see the big empty field, that was part of the village as well, but that ground now belongs to the airport. So it's private property. We used to try and walk there. Like you can see a couple fragments of roads if you can walk back there. But the last time Tom and I walked back there, we got chased out. Yes. Oh, sorry.
I moved up here around 1974, and there was Byberry Farms up there. There was farms in back of us.
Yeah.
And then in a couple of years later, they sold it. And I was really mad because the condo was built in back of me and everything, and it just sprung up. But anyway, I grew up in South Philly, and it was very Catholic. It still is. But I mean, I was born in 47, so when we were being brought up in the 50s, it was like we had the plumbing and the whole shebang. And it was really nice. It was like you described in the Northeast Village, where people had a lot of camaraderie and everything centered around the parish.
Yeah.
And it was really nice because we were near Center City, and we had a broader scope of what was going on.
Right.
So
right.
it was pretty nice.
Yeah, we did have a number of villagers that also their parents sent them to Catholic school. So they would get a bus and go over to BBM. And they went, did you go there? Yeah.
Part of the trouble in seeing the remains of the village today, its streets were its own pattern, and the modern streets are a grid parallel across Roosevelt Boulevard.
Yeah.
So none of the village streets were reused.
Right. Right. Plus they, you know, when they made the industrial park, I imagine they just dug up a lot of what was there.
Hi, Deb.
Hi. How are
In,
you?
in that one picture of the dance, it was Mr. Phillips.
Okay.
He had a dance studio in Mayfair, and he would on Frankfurt Avenue, and he would come up and teach us how to dance.
Okay.
I do have pictures of
Yeah.
better ones of that.
Did you bring
in our
pictures
tutus.
on
I
the
forgot.
table?
Yes.
Okay. So you guys can come back and look at all the pictures.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Any idea how many houses or how many families lived in the village?
I don't know how many houses. I know that it was 239 acres altogether. I think when the village opened, there's a little pamphlet that somebody created for one of the reunions. And I believe it says that when the village opened, there was 1,200 families. But as the village grew, there more likely was more than that.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Have a statement about it. Anybody remember the orange and blue caravans? Yeah. I remember going there one time, and I was just a little kid, and somebody said something to me, another kid, and I said, well, I know I am, but what are you? And a neighbor who was in there went and told my mother, and my mother gave me a real talking to about not being so smart.
Yep. And that was the thing about how we kind of knew everybody was looking out for everybody, right? You could have gotten in trouble 5 blocks away, but your mother or father knew about it, and so they were always looking out for everybody.
Okay, any other questions? One more.
I just want to mention too, that for anybody who's a village resident, oh, okay. Oh, you brought it. Oh, who asked me to read it? Oh, okay. All right, just 1 second. We do have a reunion every year at Szymanski State Park. It's the first Saturday in October. So I know that sometimes when I put things out on Facebook and things, that not everybody, kind of subscribes to all that. So I just wanted to make sure I let you guys know, because we're always looking for people to come. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to bring anything. We just all come and hang out and share memories and talk. So, sorry.
Was there any provision for churches or parochial or private schools in the village? Or did you
Not
have to be-
parochial or private, no. The parochial school, like I said, the kids would go to BVM. That was the closest Catholic school.
One of the things I found very interesting was our neighbors, we always called by their first names. We didn't say Mr. or Mrs. We called them Jack or Marge or whatever. We also had a community garden, had to be an acre.
Oh,
And
okay.
we would work the garden, but anybody could take what you grew
Yeah,
or what they grew, you could take it. So that was,
yeah.
it was really interesting that the life that we lived there. It
Sure.
was
And that
success.
really does talk about how everybody was the same, right? Nobody was like, oh, well, you can't have this because you have more than we have. We're a community. We share, we give, we share with everyone.
One of the things, dinners, we used to get K rations at times, which I would just goes to tell you that we work for it.
Yeah.
So,
But the kids didn't know that, right? I mean, and your parents didn't make you feel that way. Like I work with a lot of kids. I work in an elementary school, and I've been a school counselor and a therapist for many years. And one of the things that I hear a lot is parents telling their kids how, like, we don't have anything. We don't have money. We don't have, and it gives the kids an attitude that we have nothing. We're less somehow, But I don't get that impression from the stories that I hear about your parents that raised you in the village.
I just want to say something about, I just want to say that the school was, as you have mentioned, Debbie, very important. And the idea that it was so small. My grandchildren go to these sprawling campus type schools, and everybody knew you. The janitor was your friend. Everybody was friendly, and they tracked you. I mean, teachers knew you from the teacher before and the one after knew you. It was very close, and nobody acted like you were more than or less than for being there. It was wonderful, and they did a wonderful job of educating us. When I went to a school in Szymanski after this, it was amazing. They thought, oh, she comes to the village, she's probably going to be slow. And they were surprised that all of the kids from the village were ahead because we had that individual attention, which was so beautiful. That came from the village.
Yeah.
Give you a little more on the Quonset hut.
Okay.
That was very important. I played all the sports in the village. I lived in Normandy. That opened up in 55 and 56. We had no place to go other than the village.
Okay.
So I played sports for them for 8 years. And like you said, in the Quonset hut, we had all our banquets. We had basketball, football, baseball. And they always had the guest speaker, Steve Van Buren came one year.
Right, the
And
football player.
they had a lot of pull. You would imagine with the city, because some city workers lived in there also.
Okay.
And it was fun. And the football team, we made the Bolton newspaper. We went undefeated, unscored upon, and won the championship.
The paper that I framed, one of the other villagers, actually Tom Rogers, who started the Facebook page, he had given me the front page of a Northeast Herald, I believe it is, and it has an article on the front about the football team and how they won whatever championship, So that's out there. Oh, okay.
Where did most people work
Most people worked.
Where was there?
They
one
worked in a lot
company?
of different places. I mean, we had Nabisco across the street.
Nabisco.
But there was, I can't, Whitman's Candy, yeah.
And what
Yeah.
about the nearest hospital?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
What about the nearest hospital? I know Nazareth was there because I was born at Nazareth in Fort
Yeah.
Hope. But,
That was, yeah, I
was
think
that
that was
still
the
nearest
closest one.
hospital at that time?
Yep.
I have a question. Of your parents. Was there more of a section of what military base they were all at? I mean, how many people here, parents were Marines? Marines. Any Navy? Any Army? So they're all scattered. I was wondering
Yeah.
whether or not, because my father worked at the Marine Corps Supply Activity in Philadelphia, so he would commute every day. So it was scattered.
Right,
Came
right.
from all sides. No, I don't think they did. I just wondering.
Yeah. I just want to
What's
just
the difference
interrupt.
Between us, but rather similarity between. I think that. Well, they were all served. They had one World War II.
Yeah.
Europe, this was a can-do attitude.
Yep.
That I think they passed down, and the discipline of the service.
Oh, yeah.
That they passed down. I think so too.
Yeah.
Then the possibilities. Yes. They came back full of hope. I think it's going to be different because of something.
And just generally, I think people who've been to war, they don't talk about their experiences a whole lot. It's like that was done and over with. We did what we had to do. And now we're home and we're focusing on something else. But somebody had asked me to read this paragraph. So like I said, somebody had created, I don't know who created a pamphlet years ago. Was it you? Okay. So he asked me to read this paragraph here. It says, the year was 1946. The building of housing for returning veterans of World War II has begun. There was nothing but farms and fields, and the streets were still covered with mud. There were no sidewalks and grass as yet, as the new families moved into this temporary city. The year is 1947, when the village was complete, housing 1,391 families on 239 acres, with a grocery store, a drugstore, and even a barber shop and a doctor that made house calls. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have to wrap up. I'm sorry, we're
That's
kind of running
great.
out of time. So thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Oh, that would be great. We would
All
love
right.
it.
Thanks, everybody. And at 1 o'clock, we're going to have another presentation in here on the book, Hark Back with Love, which is a fascinating story. All right. We'll see you at 1 o'clock.
Thank you. Thank you.